I like cows and horses as well. I like that kind of the ag side, and I'm fairly mechanical. And so I decided at some point if I wanted to own my own ranch and my own cows, I needed to go into the oil and gas side and make a bunch of money. And then I get on the ranch. Otherwise, I'd always be working for somebody.
Welcome to Local Energy. My name is Peter Brecht. I'm here with my co-host Wade Spear, and our guest today is Reed Goodman. Reed, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Doing well
Yeah?
this morning.
Man, thanks for joining. I've been looking forward to this conversation with you for a couple months now. I first saw you posting up some stuff on Collide and then LinkedIn, and I'm not sure if you're out there on any other socials, but what part of the world are you in? And maybe give us a quick overview of who you are.
Yeah, so from South Texas, I just crossed I-10 on my way up to go run an errand. And so I'm no longer in South Texas as soon as you get north of I-10.
Is that the line?
That's the marker for me. So now I'm in Central Texas by about 300 yards. I put a lot of miles on, end up a lot of different places, which is why I'm doing this from the truck, and I appreciate y'all accommodating that as well. But yeah, just a small operator most of the time. I do a bit of consulting as well, so I'll go sit, work over rigs and flow back and oversee some conventional frac stuff and things like that. You know, you asked me this week what I'm up to, and next week what I'm up to. It could be totally different ends of the spectrum. Just to kind of trying to figure out my way on being independent and trying not to go get a day job.
How long have you been doing it for?
Let's see. So I left my last corporate role, I guess, was in 2020. And then we started a small tool company and had it for 3.5 years. Went to Peak Completions, was there for about a year, and then decided that I didn't want to have any partners. I didn't want to have any employees. No, I wanted to be kind of fully independent in that way. Yeah. And so that's been right at 2 years now. I've been doing that.
I love the name of your company, or maybe it's one of them, but it's War Turkey. Is that right? Is that what you went for?
So I have Jaybird Resources is my production company. We've got about 40 wells in South Texas. And I've got a friend that's got a company called Warfield is what his name. And so we were going to do Warbird Resources as a joint venture for some wells we were looking at down here. And my geologist couldn't remember Warbird, so he started calling it War Turkey. And I was like, man, we are rebranding to that.
I like your comment about like trying to stay independent, right? I mean, it really is. And so my company, I'm the same way. I'm an independent contractor, right? Just kind of meeting people, doing things, trying to keep things moving all the time. But I mean, really, when it comes down to the oil field, I mean, you're out there putting miles on your truck. You're doing some creative things to fix wells and get them running at midnight. I mean, I've seen all kinds of stuff from you. I mean, what has been maybe the most interesting thing that you've had to do, in the last couple of months just to kind of keep things moving?
Well, the most interesting thing, I think, is probably trucks breaking down. That's been I think I finally got it figured out, but I put so many miles on and we're so hard on vehicles in this industry. I bought a truck a couple of years ago and it's every 6 months or so it breaks down on me. So I ended up stuck in Shreveport, Louisiana with no vehicle and no way out. And that's how I ended up in this truck. I've now rent a truck from Premier Truck Rentals. And that was just a really fun 3 days to get back into moving. But when you're in our business, you've got to be able to get to the location, got to be able to get to the meeting, right? And so reliability is number one. So
Absolutely. That's the truck you posted, I think, on LinkedIn, right? And you got a couple mods done to it, or just things to make it a little more field resistant, right? And I think another thing too that I've just appreciated is you're doing a ton of video, right? All your videos are great, but it always starts out with a smile, right? There's no like, man, I'm doing this. I wish I wasn't doing this. Like, you can tell there's a genuine love for what you're doing. Like, was this a family thing growing up in the oil and gas industry? I mean, tell us a little bit like the backstory there.
Yeah, my mom's side of the family is on their third compression company.
Oh.
And so I grew up kind of monkeying around compressors. My dad was a manufacturing process engineer for Baker Hughes. And then, various cousins and uncles and everything are drilling engineers for Marathon and Oxy and those kind of things. So yeah, it was definitely in the family. I grew up, kind of just in it, right? And my first job was at the compressor company when I was 18. And My uncle said, I'll help you get the first one, but after that, it's on you. So, I got to pressure wash crickets out of the compressors and stuff like that. So I grew up in it and just love the heck out of it. I like cows and horses as well. I like that kind of the ag side, and I'm fairly mechanical. And so I decided at some point, if I wanted to own my own ranch and my own cows, I needed to go into the oil and gas side and make a bunch of money. And then I get on the ranch. Otherwise, I'd always be working for somebody. So
Right, absolutely. So in this collecting wells and kind of finding things and assets to buy, what's that process been for you? If you've been doing this for 2 years or longer, right? And it sounds like you have a pretty good crew around you, people you trust, you're talking with. But how have you built that up to where you're at now, where it's like, okay, maybe you're not trying to acquire as quickly, or what's that look like?
yeah, that's why I have Jaybird Resources, and then we also have War Turkey. Jaybird was started in 2019 just as a dream. I was living in Midland. I was traveling to like Fort Worth, Dallas area for sales quite often, and I would pass these little pump jacks, and it was always a dream of mine to own some of those. And so one day, actually the day T. Boone Pickens died, I pulled in and wrote down a bunch of numbers off one of those pump jacks and started doing a bunch of research and collected some oil out of one that I shouldn't have done. Now I know, and put it in a mason jar. I still got that, at the house on my desk. But, that was kind of the genesis there, was like, I want some small wells. And so I took that company, Jaybird, slow and steady through acquiring what I would consider low risk stripper wells. And I quantify a lot of that low risk because my background's been in artificial lift and wellbore integrity. You can look kind of at the mechanical side and have some idea of what's going on based on the history of that well, right? And get myself comfortable mechanically with those risks there. But then I also have War Turkey because that set of wells at Jaybird has been slowly and very methodically acquired. I have 100% of the working interest. I don't have any partners. We don't carry any debt. It doesn't make a whole lot of oil, and it doesn't hardly pay me anything, which is why I still work all these other jobs. But it's kind of my slow and steady and very intentional and well thought out.
Base
Right.
production.
It's my baseline. That's right. It's my little nest egg over there. War Turkey is like kind of, I don't want to say the opposite because it's still slow and well thought out on a lot of things, but it's drilling wildcats. It's picking up sticks in the Eagleford and the Permian and trying to find value through the bit. It's recompletions and that sort of stuff. And that is private equity and aggregated money. And so it's two different, diverge and take either one of those paths, right? And so I'm trying to keep Jaybird in a way to where it is that safe and secure and kind of my legacy, and everything's within 30 minutes of the house. So I can go pump wells in my underwear and shoot a deer on the way home and that kind of stuff. Whereas War Turkey is like, we have to have the meetings and the earnings calls, and, that's where it's going to end up.
I was going to ask, I mean, what are the things that you enjoy most about other than just freedom? For me, I felt like my job satisfaction is based on the tasks that I do, right? So, like, I love on the drilling side of things that I can make a decision today and kind of see the results tomorrow, like an immediate gratification person. I also like working with a team, right? And so I'm always relying on consultants we've got in the field and superintendents and mud engineers, working as kind of a part like that. What are the things you enjoy most about kind of operating your own wells? I mean, do you kind of get to, I guess, scratch that itch from both sides in terms of, your base production? I make my own decisions. I live and die by that. And then also, like, I got to make a PowerPoint and convince people.
Well, it's exactly that. I enjoy, like you said, the immediate gratification. I enjoy, like, yesterday I set a new motor. We bought a crane truck from a guy out of Louisiana. The crane
Okay.
truck broke like 7 times just trying to get out there and get this motor set. But we finally got it done. I got it turned on late last night. And that was, for me, that immediate gratification, right? Getting something
Right.
done, watching it pump. We've now got oil come to the tanks. I love that. And I love the challenge, right? I would never be a good painter. It's just too boring to sit there and paint a wall all
Meticulous.
day, or
Yeah.
too tedious to hit that corner, straight and just right. my brain doesn't work like that. I need the challenge. And interestingly enough, even being a small operator and not always managing, a fleet, a completion spread or whatever it may be, I've still had to develop a ton of those connections. And I've got a bunch of guys that I call day to day, hey, this isn't working. How have you guys handled it economically, right? Well
Right.
makes 4 barrels a day. I can't just go buy a flare stack. I've got to build one with parts we have in the yard, or something along those lines. So it still has required that team mentality to figure a lot of that stuff out. That the team just isn't always on my payroll, right? So
It's a
yeah.
lot of IOUs.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and when they call, I've had that a number of times. My wife is like, man, why are you always helping these guys out? I'm like, you don't know how many times I've called them and needed their brain, at 2 a.m. to get something figured out. And so that's what makes it go around.
You hit on something that's really interesting to me. So I've worked at a number of different companies. That I would say I haven't. Well, maybe now I'm starting to work on one that's kind of the size that you're kind of referring to right here. But I mean, it feels like whenever I worked at bigger companies, there was a lot of competition, not just internally, but also externally. Kind of across the
Mm-hmm.
fence or across the lease line. But as I work with smaller and smaller companies, there is definitely a lot of I don't want to just say camaraderie, but I mean teamwork. Whereas before maybe you were fighting for leases and doing these things at big companies, it feels like a lot of smaller companies, it's just trying to make sure everything floats, nothing sinks. And so that's an interesting trend that I've really just become aware of here over the last couple of years.
If you were, let's say, working at a company right now and you're like, man, I'm looking at what Reed's doing, I want to go do that. How do you start to develop those relationships with people around you? And I know this is kind of coming from more of the softer angle of relationships, because the reality is this is really hard work that you're putting in, but it does take those people skills and those friends to get it done. But where are you finding these people? I mean, it sounds like you have a great group around you.
Yeah, so many people I found through places like Collide and LinkedIn, and you asked about socials. Those are actually the only two I have anymore. I got rid of my Instagram and my Facebook, and I mean they still exist, right? But I don't have time to
Right.
really put up with those. But so much of it has been organic connections. One of my best mentors, maybe, or closest confidants right now is a guy out of Fort Worth that was a mutual friend, heard what he was doing, heard what I was doing. He's like, hey, you guys need to get together and talk. And I brought it up to him a couple of weeks ago. He's like, oh, I didn't even realize I introduced you to, but me and this guy, Phil, have just become really, really good friends. And it's funny because I'm an eternal optimist and he's I'm not an eternal pessimist, but he's definitely
Right.
a realist, right? And and so I'm pitching him his idea, and he's thinking of all the things that are wrong with it, and I need that guy, right? So we bounce a lot of ideas off of each other. That was just organic. Somebody heard about what we were doing, and put the two of us in touch. So much of this, I've had to just kind of put myself out there and say, hey, does anybody know somebody that does XYZ or is an expert in this? And it's hard because you hear often people will say things like, don't talk about it too much, just go do it. Right. Like guys that are doers, don't talk about it. Don't tell everybody your dreams. But if I wasn't talking about it and wasn't telling people what it is I'm trying to achieve, I wouldn't have learned half of this. And a lot of the stuff I might fall on my face, right, at some point. And uh, it doesn't really scare me, but if I wasn't talking about it, people wouldn't know that I was looking for that information.
Right.
And so I don't have a problem sharing all the time, kind of, what we're up to and what we're trying to get done. And I don't see many other people wanting to share like that, right? Or asking the questions nearly as much as they should. And so I think a big portion of it is just putting yourself out there and saying, hey, I'm working on this. I need an expert. I need a guy that knows something here. Tell me what I don't know. And asking even dumb questions a lot of times. I've taken to doing that sometimes on Collide, right? Where I'm like, hey, y'all tell me what you know about this. I might have some preconceived notions, but instead of asking something very guided, I ask something very general so that I can test my assumptions on it too. And I think that's been real helpful.
We have to kind of fight an algorithm these days too. So, for example, Twitter, I love that's like my social media of choice. It's how I met Wade, actually, through a connection on there, and I learn a lot through that. but the algorithm in the last couple of weeks has changed. And so now I'll put something out there and like I get no views, no responses. I mean, it's like it just shut off. And same thing for a lot of people. But you've kind of found a way, I think, to get your head above water on a lot of this, and you do get get response. But so kind of part of that with everything too is even starting this podcast and kind of me just asking Wade. All this started out was me just asking Wade questions about drilling. I knew enough about drilling to get my job done, but not enough to feel like comfortable in the conversation, right? And then next thing you know, it's like, hey, I just want to talk to more people, right? So this has been a lot of fun for that. But when you're going out to buy a well, and I kind of liken this a lot to buying a rental property, right? There's always going to be work involved. What are some of the challenges or the weird, like, have you ever bought a well and be like, damn it, like this is a bad idea, I shouldn't have done this? I mean, or is it always like, hey, I can figure this out?
A lot of them make me very nervous. Yes.
They test that optimism.
Pressure makes me nervous, like high pressure, right? Gas makes me nervous. I went to work on a well for somebody else one time, and it had maybe a PSI on it, maybe 1 PSI. And I was asked to shoot a fluid level in there to see where the level was in the casing so we can determine, kind of prove casing integrity for the Railroad Commission. I had like half a PSI, which means fluid was more or less to surface. Couldn't get my gun on there. So I pulled a swab tank out there to get that half a PSI off, see what little bit would bleed off. And it didn't bleed off. And then the well came in and I shut it in and it blew a hole in that casing. And we went from half a PSI to a hole in casing. It'll just like that, right? And when you work with these older wells, you have so many unknowns. And there is nothing that for the most part, there's nothing that I could have known with the information that I had or done differently. And so anytime we touch a wellhead that we don't have great records on, and that we haven't spent an inordinate amount of time understanding the integrity of that well, there's a lot of risk there. And so anything that has pressure on it scares the heck out of me that, we could go to open this valve and never get it shut, or that pipe nipple could be corroded internally and it just breaks off and now we have this issue. And so, yeah, I get real nervous on a mechanical side. I've also ended up several times with a well that I had some assumptions of, well, when it cut off, it was making 10 barrels of oil a day. And all the paperwork that I have says that I should be able to flick it on. It goes back to making 10 barrels of oil a day. Well, they forgot to put one sheet in that paperwork that they squeezed the zone and went up and shot another zone. And you get in there and you get to looking around and you're like, well, shoot. And so right. Particularly in the portion of the industry that I'm in, I'm not taking wells directly from Shell or Exxon or somebody that tends to have a really good set of records. And most of the wells that I've taken, I haven't paid anything for, right? I take them as P&A liability. I take them as orphan wells from the Railroad Commission, or what's called a single signature P4. And so I'm taking these wells as high risk, high reward, right? But with little to no information. And yeah, it makes me nervous all the stinking time.
I'd imagine.
How real there's an account, I'm sure you've seen it, called Zombie Wells, or that's the handle at least. I mean, there's some stuff out there. They just track issues in Texas and these leaks and all this. How real is that? I've always wanted to ask somebody that's actually out there. Is that a real thing?
Yeah, in the Permian in particular, there's a number of wells of that flavor. And one of the things that has kept me from operating anything in the Permian is, while I was at peak completions, we did a lot of remediation work. We did a lot of squeeze work in liners and that kind of stuff. And I would describe the Permian Basin as a subsurface cesspool. Everything is all the formations are commingled, and these wells in the 50s weren't designed for the pressures we're subjecting them to in the 2020s. 70 years later. So yeah, the zombie wells are real. There's also, there's an orphan well on a lease that I have right now. And we drove by it one day and it was leaking. It was actively bubbling and had some oil coming out of one of the valves that was partially shut on the casing, right? And you can see this trail of oil coming from this wellhead. It's not my wellbore, technically not my responsibility. Called the Railroad Commission and said, hey guys, meet me out here. We need to look at this. This is an orphan well y'all have. And the inspector that came out and looked at it, I said, well, are you going to shut that valve, to try to stop this leak? He said, well, I can't touch that valve yet. Like, we don't have authorization on it. I'm like, it's actively leaking. I'm like, well, within our legal framework, he's like, I can't touch that. He said,
right.
But When I walk around to the other side of the truck to grab my notepad, I can't tell you what to do. I was like, okay. So, he walked around to the other side of the truck to grab his notepad, and I went ahead and shut that valve. But it's interesting that the red tape we have, the framework that
Mhm.
we've built, the red tape we have about what we can do with some of these wells when these things are happening. And yes, sadly it does happen. And it's frustrating. It is, because we want to be good stewards, right? And we want a good image. We want to take care of what we've been given, what God has given us. We also want a good image of the industry to the rest of the world so that they know that we're being responsible and they get behind us. And when we have situations like that, it's really hard. So
Absolutely. Well, thank you for confirming that. I always see the videos of those and I'm like, man, that is a mess. And I don't, maybe they're posting the worst of the worst, but I'm sure there's some easy
they
ones that
are
are fixable.
typically,
Yeah.
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 Well, and I think too, I mean, it's a small percentage of wells that do that, but there's so many wells that, I mean, there's quite a few out there, you know? It's it's a tough situation.
I don't know what the right answer is for it. There's that's a long spiel about, what we could do to have better plugging and abandonment
Yeah.
programs, what we could do to better bond our wells so that when operators walk away, there's more money, held in trust for that. That's
To deal with
something
the
that I'm very passionate about, that I've tried to not be too vocal about yet, because I need to keep my head down and get where I'm going so that I can pop up and have some money and some influence to really pursue that. But it's on my mind all the time because it's largely a mess.
Yeah. I mean, the history of the Railroad Commission, I mean, there's so much there. And gosh, there's a guy, and his name escapes me. I've been trying to rack my brain for his name for the past, 5 minutes as we're talking through this, but he just ran out there, to kind of fix some things and clean it up. And I don't know if he won or not, but I mean,
Yeah, Hawk Dunlap.
Yeah, Hawk Dunlap. I can't believe I forgot his name. But Hawk, if you're out there and you're listening, I apologize. But anyways, he was so vocal, and I mean, he was going to all the. I mean, he had laid out such a great case for every piece of what he was trying to do, and just because he's seen it, right? And I don't know everything about him or his campaign, but talk about a guy with a reach, right? Trying to make something happen. So it was interesting to kind of watch that as a complete bystander, not a Texan. But if you want to know how to plug and abandon, just come to California because that's all we do.
Sadly, y'all aren't drilling any new ones.
They're trying. They're trying. So I know we're coming up here on the 30-minute mark, but one thing I wanted to ask is, you've got this war turkey. Are you planning on drilling, or have you drilled wells, or what's the plan on that?
Yeah, so I've got a couple of different things going right now with it. I can talk fairly loosely about it because we have a bunch of acreage already leased up around it, but there's a new basin that we're trying to prove up. We're actually, tomorrow I'll be with my geologist doing that thing you were talking about, refining the pitch deck and the presentation and the PowerPoint so that we
Right.
can start sending it out to a couple of guys, doing the office work, which is the hardest part for me. Yes, so we've got a deal there. We want to drill 6 wells to prove up about 400,000 acres in this basin and get a little bit more of the science project done there. We have a new drill down in Duval County that's just finished leasing, and I think I've got it 100% sold. And so that'll go in the next, couple of weeks. Maybe by the time this drops, we'll have it done. But yeah, there's definitely some things going on there.
It's not just a vision at this point. It's actually like you are 100% like you're doing this. This is not just okay, hopefully we get it done.
Yeah.
Like you're active on it. Okay.
Yeah, and it's interesting time with the M&A world too, right? So I'm learning a bunch of different facets at the same time. I'm really trying to dig into geology, and I'm really going to have to start drinking from a fire hose on becoming a driller. And I've got talk about network. I've got some really good support from JT Wilkerson and the guys at Dross Command, and so I've got some good guys behind me to help do some of those things. But the M&A world it's a very, one, exclusive to try to hear about these opportunities, and then 2, when you're nobody, to get a meeting can often be hard. And then 3, it's really tight right now. There's not a lot out there, not a lot of great things to go buy. You need to go dig up your own prospects and start from zero on a lot of this. There's not just a bunch of sticks laying around to go be drilled.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I think anytime I can experience what you're saying being a nobody, right? It's kind of like, man, no one knows who I am when I call, and I'm sure there's a bit of a sales angle you got to take on things that can feel unnatural at times, depending on who you are, right? You know, and it's like, you know, but you got to put yourself out there and just get after it. So my last question is, you know, is there something in oil and gas that maybe we're not talking about that we should be talking about?
Yeah, I think most of that is the orphan wells, or not even the orphan wells. Plugging liability. One of the things my dad and I talk about quite a bit is like the zombie wells, right? The Chevron did everything they could to plug that well properly in 1958, but here it is a problem 70 years later. So as we go through as an operating company, we do everything we can to a T today. But what one legacy are we leaving and what liability are we carrying for the next 70 years or 100 years, right? And I think there's a lot of conversation around that in back rooms. People are talking about it in hushed voices, trying to figure it out. I think, you know, if you want to talk about it as like ESG, like we should have some more opinion of where is that line of, you know, Chevron plugged it, did everything that day to the T, to the letter of the law as good as they could. Is that still their responsibility 70 years later, or is that the people's responsibility? I don't really have the answer, but I think there needs to be a lot more conversation about, you know, and because I don't want to carry that for 70 years. You know, I don't want my kids, you know, if they're involved in the business to have to inherit that problem. And so trying to understand how that carries through for the next generation and how we can be the most responsible on it. I think that's a big conversation that needs to be had.
I love where your thinking is and where you're heading with all that. Where's a good place for people to connect? I know Collide. If you're already on Collide, you'll see Reed on there. If you're not on Collide, check it out. But where else should people connect?
Yeah, Collide and LinkedIn's where I'm at. I give my phone number out pretty readily. You know, if people have questions about something they're doing, about a project they're on, or how to get into the business, you know, if they've been thinking about wanting to start their operating company, I'll give you a very true look at, you know, what it's been for me. Of course, your mileage may vary, but, you know, it doesn't cost me but a couple of minutes going down the highway to help somebody understand what it is they're really asking for. So, yeah, would love to connect to anybody that's wanting to do something like that. I think we're going to need a lot more independence. All the old ones are dying and nobody's filling their shoes.
Reed, man, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and you know, pulling over in the truck and just chatting with us. But have a great week. Wade, thank you for jumping on too. I know I always look forward to these conversations with you too. So until next week, thank you guys, and we'll see you again soon.